Welcome back to Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Holton from El Dorado PD in Kansas. He has 36 years experience in enforcement. Really looking forward to this conversation. So welcome, Chief Holton. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Paige. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course, no, I'm really looking forward to it. And, at the time of airing, it's Friday and we're both in high spirits. And I think this is going to be a good one. So I really appreciate your time today. I wanted to maybe ask you what your life was like before law enforcement. Maybe tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Sure. I was born in Wichita, Kansas. The first 7 years of my life, that's where I lived. When I was 7 years old, we lost my father to cancer, at which point my mother and two of my brothers moved out to California to be closer to my mother's side of the family. Um, After moving back to Kansas a year later, my mother was diagnosed with stage four um, colon cancer. And when I was 11 years old, we lost her to cancer as well.
Mm, that's devastating.
Yeah, it was a tough road.
How did you learn from such a young age to be able to cope with that?
Well, and as we talk more about this throughout this session, you'll learn that I didn't know how at that time. We just kind of my brother and I just kind of picked up the pieces and tried to go on the best we could. Um, we had a sister on my mother's side that was willing to take us in, that was very close. So my brother and I went to live on a farm with my aunt and uncle. Um, from that point on, we never really, my brother and I talked about the loss of our mother and father from time to time, but we never really had any outside resources at that time. And when I say that, I say that is no fault to my aunt and uncle. We were to say that we were grateful is such a huge understatement for the life that they gave us after the passing of our parents.
Mm.
Um, but we just didn't have the resources back then to be able to process or offload what we'd been through.
I can really relate to you, but in obviously it's not the same story, it's a different context. And I don't know if I shared this with you offline, but both of my parents were drug addicts and they were not present in my life. And I was raised by a single stepdad. And so I can relate to both things that you said of really not knowing how to process some of the things that you went through. And for me, and I don't know if you can relate to this or if you have a different story than mine, but I felt like I just learned how to shove everything down and kind of posture up and keep going.
Absolutely.
And I feel an immense amount of gratitude for my stepdad as well, because I do not know where I would be without him stepping up. And I was not his kid, right? And he didn't have any obligation to me whatsoever, but he wanted to give me a really good life. And so there was this kind of contrast of me feeling so grateful, and obviously like I love him so much and he's my best friend still to this day, but also feeling abandoned
Yeah.
and feeling um like a burden on him and having these different feelings, that also existed at the same time and not really knowing what to do with all of those feelings.
Right. And yeah, I mean, we're similar in the fact that although we were grateful for the fact that somebody stepped up in our lives, we really had no mechanism to deal with the loss that we had suffered.
Yeah.
And I can remember going through school back during that time, and I just felt like I was walking around in a cloud. I felt like I was constantly lost.
Mm.
So yeah, I I understand completely where you're coming from.
Did you feel like you had the confidence or the ability to talk about these things, or do you think that it was something that you kind of bottled up and kept inside?
It was definitely something that I bottled up and I kept it inside.
Yeah,
Um, I didn't want people feeling sorry for me.
yeah,
I'm not the only human being on this planet that's ever lost a loved one, and I knew that. So I didn't want to talk about it.
yeah.
Uh, I didn't want to feel like I was taking something away from somebody else.
I think for me too, I just wanted to fit in.
Hmm.
I didn't want people to know the messy parts of me because I didn't want to necessarily be defined by that. And I just wanted to kind of be like everybody else, even though I knew that my upbringing and my family life didn't necessarily look like everybody else's.
Right, right. And I grew up in a very, very small community back then. So, most everybody probably knew what was going on in my life. Um, but the flip side of that is that they didn't want to bring it up. They didn't want to say anything to me because they didn't know how that was going to affect me.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a double-edged sword, so to speak.
Yeah, I can see that. So you went through this challenging time in your childhood. What made you want to begin a career in law enforcement?
I had um, a chief of police in my hometown, knew completely what I'd been through, what I was going through. He knew what path I was on, and he took me under his wing. He had just started a cadet program in our community, and he was talking to me about this community, both me and my brother, and got us interested in this program. We started this program, and Paige, I got to tell you, from that point on, I fell in love with law enforcement. I learned. I will say it right here. I owe my entire career to this man. Um, just the aspects of honesty, integrity, accountability that he taught me. Um, I could go on and on, but that's when I found my passion for law enforcement. I was 14 years old.
Wow. I love that story. I love that there was someone looking out for you and maybe recognize that you didn't have it the easiest growing up and needed some positive influences in your life to inspire you to be
Yes.
something great. And I'm curious, do you think that because you had that experience, that that influenced the way that you lead today? Do you think that you try to have a positive impact on other people because you had that experience with him?
100%.
Mm. I think that it's such a powerful thing to remember,
Yeah,
and I would imagine that he did that because he genuinely cared about you, not
no doubt.
not because he wanted some sort of recognition. I'm sure he had no idea that we would today be talking about him and how you owe your career to him. Like
Yeah,
he simply did that out of the kindness of his heart to say, "Hey, I'm gonna be a positive influence for this kid." And so anyone who's listening, it doesn't matter what role you have within the organization or within your community, everyone has the ability to inspire other people and, to look out for other people. So I absolutely love that story.
we should focus more on that very thing right there, inspiring each other,
Hmm.
lifting each other up. Yes,
Yeah, I think it's so easy sometimes to get lost, and it's the saying, get lost in the sauce. Have you heard this? Like
yes,
you just kind of get lost in the day to day, and I think so often like we tell ourselves that we don't have time for this, we don't have time for that, and we have a lot of tunnel vision, and I myself am guilty of that too, that sometimes you don't take that moment to like look around and take a breath and, have those moments to connect with people.
right, right.
So did your brother end up in law enforcement too? You said that you guys kind of came up together in this cadet program. Is he also in law enforcement?
He did for a short time. He served as a reserve police officer for several years in the town that we grew up in. From that point, he kind of moved on. He went to work in the private sector and
Okay.
has been there ever since. But he's followed my career. We talk quite a bit about, you know, the good old days as we called them.
Yeah. And did you stay in touch with the chief that impacted you? Is that
I'm
something
still in contact with him today.
you are?
I
Oh,
am.
I love that. We're gonna have to send him this podcast so that he knows
Yes.
that, his legacy lives on through you.
Yeah, I'm
That,
blessed to have him as a part of my life, in my life.
yeah. So when you and I talked offline, you talked about coming up in this career and being taught to kind of shoulder everything,
Yeah,
everything that you went through. And I know a lot of people can relate to that. A
yes,
lot of people were brought up in this, suck it up. It's part of the job, just keep going. You said this to me, and I wanted to kind of maybe quote you a little bit, but you said that it piles up and it destroys you if you don't deal with it.
that is absolutely right.
Can you explain your experience with that?
So, yeah, the first 25 years of my career, I spent with the sheriff's office here in Butler County. And we are the largest uh, county geographically in the state of Kansas.
Mm,
So obviously, we saw a wide variety of different things, as all first responders across this country do. Whether you're in a small community or a large city, there's no limit to the crimes or traumas, if you will, that occur in our communities. So as time goes on, as time went on throughout my career. We would see fatality accidents, shooting victims, stabbing victims, domestic violence victims, all of that. And as you cleared each scene, we live by the philosophy that, like you just said, you suck it up, you shoulder it, and you go on down the road. We don't
mm,
have time to deal with this right now. Um, so after 25 years in this job, I got to a point where I felt like I was going back to when I was 11 or 12 years old. I felt like the weight of the world was just sitting on my shoulders, and
mm,
I had nowhere to place it. I had nowhere to put it. So I made a decision I think it was 2018. I realized that I needed to focus on me. I needed to deal with what was going on with me before I was even going to have an opportunity to do something for somebody else.
mm.
And if that's the case, then I knew I needed to step away, and I did. And at that point in my life, I knew that it was time to deal with the loss of my mother and father. It was time to, and I didn't tell you this, I may have, but the aunt and uncle that took my brother and I in passed away right after I graduated high school.
Wow.
So um, I knew I had to deal with that. And I knew that I had to deal with all of the trauma that I'd experienced throughout the 25 years that I'd spent in law enforcement so far. Um, so I stepped away from this job for 14 months. I went to work in the private sector for a while. I focused on my therapy. I focused on me and what I needed to do to be healthy, first and foremost for me.
Yeah. Can I ask you a random question, but I promise there's a system to my madness right now.
Sure,
Do you think that the calls for service have increased or decreased over time?
they've increased.
Okay.
Without a doubt, they have increased.
The thing that popped up to me is the irony of, when you were coming up, earlier in your career, this mentality of we don't have time to deal with this. And to your point, one, there were a lot more people who were ready and willing to do this job than there are now. So staffing was higher.
Yep,
Calls for service were lower. And there's still this mentality of we don't have time to deal with it. And I think that now we're seeing the opposite. It's, calls to service are higher, staffing is lower, but it's like it is essential that we take the time to be able to deal with these things. And there's this new recognition of it. So I think there's some irony in that of like, we don't have time. And back then you did have the time. You have less time now, but I think there's more of this awareness that it's almost a non-negotiable. I mean, it is
Yeah.
non-negotiable at this point. You have
Mhm.
to take care of your people. I know you said that you left the career, and I really appreciate you saying that it wasn't just the cumulative stress from the career. It
Right.
was also life. And I think if we are going to have these conversations saying that you are human, then we have to also recognize that every single person in this profession has experiences and stress and trauma that happens in their personal lives as well. And it's all cumulative
Yes.
and it all compiles on top of each other. And if there aren't resources to be able to process those things, then things that you just mentioned happen. You kind of reach a point where it's almost a breaking point. And I don't want to put that word in your mouth, but to me that's what it sounded like, that you had reached this breaking point where you're like, I gotta go get myself help and I have to remove myself from this situation for a period of time.
You're absolutely correct. And that's exactly where I was at. I was at a breaking point and I knew that. Um, Going back to what you were talking about, as far as first responders, the comparison between then and now, I think you have law enforcement leaders across this country, um, just like me, different stories, but I think that you're seeing a shift in the mindset
Yeah,
of law enforcement, not just law enforcement leaders. I'm talking leaders, first responder leaders all across this country, who have identified this. And collectively, I believe that, and I don't speak for anybody else, but I think that we've recognized the fact that there's a need um, to prioritize mental wellness for first responders. And I say that because if our first responders aren't healthy, we have nobody to respond.
yeah,
So we have to make that a priority, not only in our lives, we have to set that example, but we also have to resonate that down through our ranks so that people make it a priority to themselves.
I agree with you. And there's so many things to unpack in that. It's almost like you had to go through that in order to come out the other side and have it be a priority. I think that if you didn't go through those things collectively, because you're right, there are a lot of leaders that I've talked to across the country that share the same ideology and passion for wellness because they recognize the need because they came from an environment where it was not acceptable to be, it was not okay to not be okay.
Correct.
And so it's unfortunate that you had to go through that, but I also think that it's the greatest opportunity to do better. Once you
Sure.
know better, do better, right? I'm really curious to know like what, because I can only imagine that leaving the career, it's quite obvious that you love this career and you
I
have
do.
since you were 14. And so I can only imagine how difficult that decision was to leave the profession for over a year. What were some of the resources that helped you to offload that cumulative stress and to get back into law enforcement?
Well, I found a therapist who I use still to this day. Um, she's an amazing human being. And I want to point out that finding the right person is very important. It can't just be anybody. I found that person. I was fortunate to find that person. So utilizing that resource for me, that's what I have latched onto since that time.
Yeah. And was this, when you say the right person, is it someone that just you connect with on a personal level? Is it someone who specializes in first responders? What was your experience with that?
So mine does not specialize as particularly for first responders. But um, the biggest connection was the loss of my parents.
Mm,
Um, so having that in mind, we were able to start there and work all the way up through my career. And we're still working on it today. So, and I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not ashamed to say that. I'm actually very proud of that. But starting at the beginning and working all the way through has been, I can't even describe it to you.
yeah.
It's been phenomenal.
Well, I appreciate you saying that you're still working on it because I think that there's this maybe idea that like you're gonna be like quote unquote fixed and that there's a destination to this. And if you can come in with the mindset of it's this ongoing process. I think that that's important because
Mhm.
otherwise people get frustrated because maybe they're not seeing the results that they would like to as quickly as they would like to. And I think we'd all love to be able to take a magic pill and like be miraculously better, but that's not the
Sure.
reality of the situation. And I agree with you. For me, I had a conversation, I had a mentor, and this was still like in the early stages. I was working on myself. I was doing a lot of, physical stuff and, breathing techniques, but I
Mhm.
hadn't really taken the next step to do like a lot of talk therapy or meditation or anything of that nature yet. So this was like very early. And I was in a class where they made us all sit in a circle and meditate silently in the same room. And I, at the time, still had flashbacks and was very uncomfortable sitting with myself alone. And that put me into hysteria. Like it was not, I was not ready for that. And to this day, I remember that feeling and I try to approach the things that I do with that sensitivity of trauma and PTSD and things that people maybe have
Sure.
gone through in their lives. But I had a conversation with my mentor after, and he was like, Paige, if you don't want to sit with yourself, how are you ever going to expect anyone else to want to sit with you? And it was just like this very simple concept of like, if you want people to like be around you and be in your corner, like you have to be able to like love yourself enough or respect yourself enough to be able to also sit with yourself and be able to like work on yourself, and it was this moment where I was like, wow, like it just put I think it just put the responsibility on me a little bit
Mhm.
to take those next steps. And when I did start to do some of the harder works, I told him, I was like, I'm scared. Like I don't want to know what's down there. I
Absolutely.
I put the stuff down there for a reason because
Mhm.
I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to process it because it's really painful and it's sad and it's hurtful and it's all the things, right? And that's why you bury it so far deep down there that you hope it never comes up ever again because you don't want to. And I realize that if I don't process those things, they're always there. They're lingering within me.
Absolutely.
And so I agree with you when I started to offload those things, even though it was some of the hardest work I ever had to do. And there were lots of tears and emotions. Afterwards, you feel like lighter and
Oh,
you feel
yeah.
almost like a sense of freedom. Like, wow,
Yes.
like I didn't understand that I felt so heavy, that that was impacting me so much until you start to like unpack the backpack a little bit and it
Yeah.
starts to feel lighter.
And I can remember my first session with my therapist and acknowledging that very feeling right there because when I went in the first time, I had no idea what to expect. And the first one was an hour-long session. And when I walked out of there, I remember driving home and feeling such peace. And
Mm,
it was my first session.
yeah, I love that. Because I think that there is so much anxiety and fear going into it, and to immediately have that experience of like,
Yeah,
wow, like, and I'm sure that, maybe that wasn't a feeling that you were used to at that time to
not
have
at
that
all.
sense of peace.
Yeah. And I think part of that feeling was knowing that I walked out of that office not feeling like I had been judged.
Mm,
Um, you know, the the person that I was talking to across from me had no expectation of me, and there was no judgment for what I said or how I felt.
yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the toughest walls that each and every one of us have in front of us is anticipating that feeling of somebody is going to judge me for this. Something more negative is going to come out of this for me, and I just don't want to deal with it.
Thank you for bringing that up. I actually just had a conversation about this, and it's so true. I think when we talk about stigma, I think that for me, vulnerability is so hard for people. And I think that there's a lot of stigma around things because of the fear of rejection or
Yeah.
the fear of judgment. And that was for me, because there is a level of vulnerability that has to happen,
Hmm.
and there's so much fear in that. And I think I wanted to ask you, because we talked about this, where you said it is so normal to feel this way,
Hmm.
and I completely agree with you. Like, the more you go through in your life and in your career, there's no way that some of those things aren't going to impact you. And it is a totally normal reaction to feel this way and to have stress or have things impact you mentally. Why do you think that that is still so hard for people to accept? Do you think that it is pride or fear or, you know,
I think it's a combination of things. We live in a society where, take social media for example. I mean, somebody takes a picture of you and shares it, or they can say anything they want to say.
mm,
So I think everybody tries to protect themselves emotionally by suppressing all of the things that they deal with, the trauma, the fears, the angers, the hurts, whatever the case may be, and they guard those for the simple fact that they don't know how other people are going to react to them. They don't know how other people are going to treat them based on what they share with others.
yeah, yeah. And I think that it's also our responsibility on the flip side to that to make sure that if people are sharing things and are vulnerable, that we're open and receptive and we're
Yes,
not judgmental ourselves to other people because it is it's learned behavior.
it is.
Like, I feel the fear of excuse me, I feel the fear of judgment and rejection because I've been judged and rejected in my life,
Hmm.
right? And so I think that we also have a responsibility to make sure that when people are sharing things with us, even if it's something simple and like maybe you don't think it's a big deal, they're testing the waters a bit. I've noticed that
Yes,
where like someone
yes.
might come up to me and be like, "Hey," and they'll like say like a little something, and if I don't respond in an intentional way where I'm like open and present and supportive, then they're probably not going to come back to me and try to talk to me about something that's even bigger and deeper,
Right.
because the first interaction was like, oh, well, they immediately just like judged me or weren't open and receptive to that. So I think we also have to be aware of how we show up for other people.
Absolutely. And to that point, I will say that as a leader in law enforcement, I think it's very important that I share my vulnerabilities with others because if I'm able to do that and they see that I'm able to do that and willing to do that, maybe they will follow suit and do much of the same.
I agree with you. And that was really one of the reasons why I started this podcast was, reaching out to individuals like yourself who have those perspectives, but are also willing to talk about it because I do think it's so powerful. And to me, like, the biggest disservice is for us to view vulnerability as
Mhm.
weakness. I think we have to flip that script. And
Absolutely.
I'm hoping this is going to help to cultivate that and to show people that there is so much strength in sharing our stories and relating with each other and normalizing these things. It's not weakness at all. It's actually extremely courageous and strong.
Well, and I hadn't thought about this until just now, but since you and I started talking about this from the first time, um, this is part of our healing process right here.
Mm.
Um, so the more we talk about what we've been through, the things that we've encountered, and how we dealt with those things, that's all part of our healing process. And that's what I want to encourage other first responders, anybody really, to feel comfortable talking about this, because this is all part of the healing process.
Mm.
And I don't want anybody to be like me and wait 20 plus years to try to dig that up and start sifting through it and dealing with it. When you identify that you're struggling with something, that's the perfect time to start dealing with it, to start talking about it, to start offloading it.
I agree. It's really interesting that you said that because when I first started 8 years ago in this wellness space, I didn't openly share my story for several years. And I had been doing like my own personal work to like process all the things that I had been through, but I was not open to sharing that with people. And it was actually a chief of police who looked at me one day and he goes, "All right, tell me your story." And I was like, "What?" Oh, what do you mean? Like, I'm perfect. Like, you know everything. And he was like, well, first of all, I did research on you because that's what we do. And I know that that's not true. And so I would love to hear it from you. I just rhymed a bunch and that sounded really funny to me. Um, but, and it was the first time. And I just remember him looking at me and I was like, I'm not getting out of this, but it was a very like, I don't know how to explain it. I could tell it was from a loving place. I could tell it was from a non-judgmental place. And so I did. I shared it. And ever since then, I agree. I think that I feel more empowered now that I've had the opportunity to share the things that I've been through, that they no longer affect me in the same way.
Mhm.
I'm no longer ashamed of those things or embarrassed of those things. I feel honestly like they are some of my biggest strengths that,
Yeah.
those times of adversity and you being able to persevere and keep going and having that resilience and then being
Yes.
able to share that it is, and I know you said that it almost feels like a responsibility to you now to share that, and I agree
Yes.
because I think that there are, it is so unrelatable if we walk around this world saying that we are perfect and nothing has ever impacted us. And
Yeah.
then the message that we are sharing with other people is that there must be something wrong with them if it's impacting them because they're looking up to you in
Yes.
leadership, right?
Yes.
And if you are
Absolutely.
saying, I have been through it, like I might not know exactly what you're going through, but I have been through similar experiences
Mhm.
and I'm willing to share that and hear the things that helped me. It gives everyone else permission to be like, okay, like I'm not broken. This is normal. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and take care of myself. And so I agree. I think that it is a part of that healing process, but I also think it spreads the message.
Well, and for the longest time, it didn't even dawn on me that me sharing my story could possibly benefit somebody else.
Right.
And as time went on, I realized that it was important for me to share with others that I didn't handle my situation very well at all.
Mm,
Uh, People need to know that. People need to know that, however you decide to handle it, it you may look back on it and say, I could have done this differently. I certainly do. Um, but it gives other people a perspective of how they can move forward.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. I would imagine, and again, I don't want to put this in like on you, so I would love if you could share your experience with this, but was it difficult for you in the beginning to be vulnerable with your team, or do you feel like that came pretty naturally?
No, that too was very difficult for me.
Yeah,
You
that's
know, we work in a world where we're the tough guys. We can take anything, we can deal with anything. And in my younger years, there was no way I was going to share this with the rest of my team, just because there again, I didn't want them to doubt me. I didn't want them to doubt my ability as a police officer or as a sheriff's deputy. Um, I wanted people to think that I was just trudging through life and everything was great.
yeah,
And the flip side of that, the reality of that was that wasn't true at all.
yeah.
So I wasn't being honest with myself.
And that was my thought is that I could only imagine how incredibly challenging that would be, especially with how you were quote unquote raised, through
Mhm.
law enforcement. Once you did start sharing your story and you started being vulnerable and, and talking to your team about these things, what has the response been to that? Have you seen any direct impact? Do you feel like that has positively influenced the people around you?
I do, in the fact that they see it as, I am willing to be vulnerable with them. I think that's probably the biggest impact that I've seen. But I also see others sharing their stories as well.
Mm,
And we talked about this prior to the podcast, but you know, it takes the entire village in any organization to pull together. You have to get that buy-in, and through that buy-in, that's where you start to grow your culture. And this is just one of many pieces in building the culture within our organization.
yeah. I mean, I have heard that culture is the number one thing. And, if you, it's almost like the foundation, and if you don't have that, then everything that you put on top of it is gonna fall flat,
It's a
essentially.
complete struggle. Yes.
Yeah. What would you say to other leaders out there who maybe haven't been vulnerable or maybe don't feel comfortable sharing their story? Like, what advice would you give to them for taking that initial step and building that culture where there is acceptance around wellness and it's not so stigmatized?
I would say as a law enforcement leader, it's important to let people know who you are. It
Mm,
is important to share what you've been through in this life with others. Again, like you just said, people look up to us. They need to know who we are, and the more they know, the better. They need to know how we dealt with things. Um, so I mean, allow yourself to be vulnerable. Allow yourself to be the example of the department that you lead.
yeah,
Um, when it comes to vision and mission statements and expectations, I will tell you that our staff completely understands where I'm coming from when I say we will treat everybody equally, regardless of, because again, we're in a small community. We know a lot of people. We have a lot of repeat customers. I don't care what they've done. I don't care who they are. They will be treated just the same as anybody else.
yeah.
Um, and that comes through what I've been through in my life. So um, sharing what you've been through in your life can help you establish your expectation as a leader.
I appreciate that. The one thing that kind of came up when you said that is learning empathy.
Mhm.
And I know that that is a challenging conversation because and I would love your opinion on this because from what I've heard is, it's hard to teach people how to have empathy. And but when you can, not only does it help you within your organization, right? Because you're looking out for each other. And it's what we talked
Mhm.
about earlier of like understanding that everyone's going through their own stuff
Yes,
and not judging and treating them with respect and having an open mind. But then that also translates into the community.
it
And,
does.
you know, there were so many incidents in my life, where there was a certain amount of empathy that had to happen in order for, law enforcement to show up for me in
Mhm.
my situation. And how do you teach that? And I think that to your point, if you can start having a culture within your organization where you talk about stuff and you can understand where people are coming from and
Mhm.
can relate to them, even if it's not the same exact story, or at least you can sympathize with the situation, then that's going to only improve the way that you show up for your community members, especially in this environment right now where there's a lot of mental health calls.
Yes, absolutely. And when it comes to teaching empathy, I'm convinced that we have to be the example of that.
Mm.
Our people have to see us show empathy. But part of that teaching is telling people, having them understand that you don't know, regardless of who you're dealing with, you have no idea what they've been through or what they're going through at that very moment. So you have to be considerate of that. Um, we're police officers. We're taught how to protect ourselves. We're excuse me, taught how to approach every situation, and that's great.
Mhm.
But there also has to be another side to that. There also has to be a point where the person that you're talking to is a human being. And we have to know the limits of our power. We don't have the power to judge anybody. That is not granted to any person on this earth. That belongs to God himself. So we need to take that out of the equation.
Yeah.
So,
I appreciate that reminder that like everyone is human and it's that old like adage, right? Like treat people how you would want your own family member to be treated or how
yes,
you would. And I think it's more effective, honestly, of how you want your family treated. Because sometimes like we have that attitude of like, well, we don't care if they treat us like whatever, but you do
right.
care how someone's going to treat your spouse, your kid, like,
Yes.
whatever, your parents, your brother, sister. And so I think that sometimes we have to remember, even though it's so simple, it's like treat people that way,
Yes.
Like what if this was your family member in this situation? How would you want them to be treated? And it goes back to that level of compassion for
Yep.
people, and um I I learned this from my grandparents, and they've since passed, and it gets me emotional. But my dad was gang affiliated, 6-year sentence for narcotics. He got out. He was in and out for another decade after, still active in his addiction, domestic violence calls all the
Yep.
time. Um, and I just remember like the level of compassion that like my grandparents still had for him.
Mhm.
And obviously that's their son, but everybody else gave up on him, including myself for a period of time, if I'm being
Sure.
completely honest. And I just remember them just never wavering in that and just always believing that he could improve himself in his situation. And I think sometimes it's so easy, especially like you said, if you're experiencing the same people over and over, I think that would
Mhm.
be such an easy thing to be like, oh, this person again, like they're a lost cause. And I definitely did that. I think I did that to my dad for a period of time where I just kind of gave up, and so did his brothers, and so did everybody else. But I just remember like my grandparents being like, no, like we're not going to give up hope. We're going to keep showing up and we're going to keep doing the things that we need to do to try to get him the help that he needs and to
Mhm.
to get him better. And now he's sober and he's started a new life for himself, and they never ever gave up on him. And I think that sometimes we have to remember that,
Good
that
for him.
there is opportunity for people to turn their lives around. And I think sometimes when you are seeing the same actions over and over and over again from people, regardless if that's like within your circle or within
Mhm.
your community, the people you're serving, to your point, trying not to have that judgment and trying to just show up and have almost like faith and conviction that it is possible for people to do better.
Right. And I go back to my story every time I talk about this prior to my career in law enforcement because there was a point in time where I didn't think anybody in this world believed in me. I
Mhm.
didn't. And then uh, I have a police chief come out of nowhere who takes an interest in me and then showed me that he believed in me. So the point to that, the moral of that story is it doesn't matter who shows up in your life as long as you know that they believe in you. And sometimes that's all people want.
Yeah.
They don't even have to know you. Um, but to have somebody show up in your life after everything that you've done, after everything that you've been through, and say, "Look, I believe in you. I know you can do this." Um, that makes the world a better place.
Yeah, you're pulling at my heartstrings, Holton. Um, I I agree. I had a similar thing where like if people in your life tell you that you're nothing for long enough, you're
Mhm.
gonna believe it.
Absolutely.
And the reverse is also true. And had that same feeling, where I was like, man, like no one believes in me. Everyone just thinks I'm gonna end up like my parents, and
Mhm.
there was no bar to strive for. And you start to believe that like you are worthless in a way. At least for me, I was like, wow, like no one expects me to be anything anyway, and no one believes in me, and I don't have
Mhm.
that support system. And yeah, to have someone come in and be like, you know what? Like, I know that you've made some bad decisions. I know that you haven't had it easy, but I'm going to be that source of inspiration and I'm going to tell you that I believe in you. Like, that is so powerful. And
This world needs more of that.
I agree. My last question for you for today, what words of wisdom would you share with someone who's earlier in their career? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way.
Make yourself a priority.
Mm,
Make your physical and mental health a priority. If you do this, you will put yourself in a position that you will be the hero for somebody. You will be the hero to your family, whoever. But you have to make yourself a priority because if you don't, and you do things like I did things, you're no good to anybody. You have to take care of yourself.
thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story, your experiences, and my hope is that this is an inspiration for other people and a reminder that it's okay to reach out for resources and it's okay to be vulnerable and share your story. And I really appreciate you.
Glad to do it. Thank you for having me.
Of course.